Toronto East, much like Toronto Central, much like Toronto West, we saw a twofold increase of transactions, going from 150 transactions to 380. In today's video, in contrast to my last video, I'm going to break down some year-to-date numbers with regards to the detached property market in different areas of York Region and Toronto. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Realtron Realty. The average price of a detached home in the city of Toronto as of January 2020 was $1.369 million. So obviously this is a general category because what's included in this price is bungalows that are 2 bedrooms are included alongside 2-story detached properties that were built last year with 4 bedrooms and 2 garages and everything in between. So keep that in mind. But nonetheless, January of 2020, the city of Toronto, from the west side to the east side, from Water, the Lakeshore to Steeles, was at 1.369. Well, as of November, that figure increased to $1.47 million. It's almost a $110,000 increase in average price. Now, what's most alarming is the number of transactions. Usually when there is more transactions, the average goes down. However, in the month of January of 2020, there was about 400 transactions. So that average of 1.369 was based on 400 or so sales. But the November figure was based on a twofold increase in the number of sales in 900 sales. So even in dollar volume alone, that's a substantial increase. But then we have this increase in the number of transactions as well. It's going to be a common theme throughout the rest of this video where I break down other areas as well. You will see the fact that not only has the price increased, but the number of transactions as well. Now, a portion of this is truly speculative. However, I'm confident in saying that this is not all investors. A lot of end users are buying at a rampant pace because of the record lows in rates, and at the same time sellers more than ever are understanding the power they have in terms of leverage in pricing properties to induce and instigate multiple offers. We can break down this figure into Toronto Central, and we can break down Toronto Central even further into C1, C2, C3, and we can even break down that further into smaller and smaller segments and demographics. However, unfortunately, I don't have time to record a 2-hour video, even though I don't think you guys want to watch me talk for 2 hours either. Not surprisingly so, the Toronto Central figure for both months, January, November, was doing the major lifting, bringing up the average. For instance, even though our average for November of 2020 was 1.447 for Toronto at large, Toronto Central, the average for detached home was 2.2 million, which represents a substantial increase of 200K plus once more from the 1.995 it was at in the beginning of the year in January. Now, what's bringing the average down at all times in Toronto is the East. I mean, that's the cheapest area with relative understanding of cheapness when we're talking about millions of dollars right now, right? In the East, the average price in the beginning of the year in January was $1,050,000, whereas by November, the average price increased to 1.1, most specifically 1.16. Now here, once again, let's take a look at this number of transactions. Toronto East, much like Toronto Central, much like Toronto West, we saw a twofold increase of transactions, going from 150 transactions to 380. Pure dollar volume, that's going from 160 million worth of real estate in 1 month to 400 million. And once again, this is all interrelated. It is the struggling condo market. It's the rates being lower than ever. It's the fact that people no longer want to stick to the central areas of Toronto in terms of condominiums, venturing out and buying and competing with other buyers for land. The decline of the condo market is greatly aiding and further accelerating in conjunction to reasons that are independent of the condo market, but nonetheless further accelerating the detached, semi-detached freehold market, even though we're only now talking about the detached portion of the freehold market. Now let's turn our focus into York Region. And here is, in my opinion, one of the areas within York region that is the most alarming. But we'll get to that in short. York region at large, which constitutes Markham, Richmond Hill, Newmarket, Aurora, Vaughan, and all the other areas that I have not mentioned, you can see on the map. Let's go through those numbers as we did with Toronto. The average price of a detached property in the beginning of the year in York region, once again, a very large land mass across multiple property types. So these are very general numbers. General numbers, as always I say, give you an idea at which direction to go to look for the answer, but it's not a fine enough lens to find the most specific and detailed answer. Nonetheless, the average price was 1.135 million in the beginning of the year. Where we ended things was actually at 1.3 million at November. Now, you might say, well, this is not that alarming, right? It's only a $200,000 increase. I mean, it is alarming, but with relative and within context of what other numbers you've discussed thus far, it seems at pace. Well, here comes the shocker, which is the number of transactions and the total dollar volume. It went from 470 transactions in November to 956, but in dollar volume, we went from $470 million worth of real estate transactions to 1.2 billion in York region. Now, this number is higher as compared to the city of Toronto, even though the city of Toronto per average has higher averages. Well, the reason being is because there are more transactions and there is more land and there is more inventory in terms of detached properties in York region than the city of Toronto. And furthermore, as we see this mass migration outside of the central locations of Toronto, even into the suburbs of Richmond Hill, even though those properties are cheaper, they're at all-time highs. Whereas Toronto, even though they're very high, they still have not seen the all-time highs we saw in 2015-16. So, put in a different way, although an average property is more expensive in Toronto, an average property, I mean, speaking detached in that sense, in Richmond Hill or in, let's say, Vaughan, is less expensive than its Toronto counterpart, but those are at all-time highs right now. Whereas the ones in Toronto, although once again on average more expensive, are less in terms of number of transactions and still haven't reached the peaks that we've seen in the past. Richmond Hill, for instance, one of the central locations in York region and the closest to Toronto, went from 1.431 million to 1.5 million. Speaking of Richmond Hill, this leads me to segue into what your money can buy, my latest episode on that, where I run down a $1.13 million property in Richmond Hill that I sold and bought. Go watch that video. In the beginning of the year, there were 3 areas in York region that the average price of a detached home was under 1 million, namely Newmarket, East Gwillimbury, and Georgina. Now there's only 2. By the end of the year, Newmarket has actually gone above $1 million price point, while the other 2 are still below $1 million, but they've also increased substantially as well, and they remain the only 2 areas in York region under $1 million. Vaughan, once again, another area in York region, went from 1.3 million to 1.4 million from the beginning of the year to November, the most recent month. And I can keep going, breaking down every area in more and more detail and even refining the lens in smaller areas, but the video would be too long. Feel free to subscribe and ask me any questions you have about specific areas. I would be happy to answer. And yeah, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Realtron Realty Inc. Please subscribe, comment, rate, and review. It would be much appreciated, and stay safe. Thank you very much.